Okay, I know it can sometimes seem like the right has these superpowers where they can just get away with everything, but that is not entirely true. Recently, we have seen a remarkable string of accountability. Today, for example, right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones agreed to liquidate his personal assets in order to pay the families of Sandy Hook victims the $1.5 billion he owes them in damages after spreading lies about the 2012 school massacre, a move that would ultimately end his ownership of the InfoWars company. It comes just days after Jones openly sobbed on his conspiracy-laden broadcast, baselessly claiming the deep state was trying to shut him down.
I just want to fucking stop these people. They gotta be stopped. We gotta stop them.
No, Alex, it's not the deep state. It's the families of murdered babies who a court said you defamed. There's also Steve Bannon, who, as you may recall, said this the day before the January 6th insurrection.
Listen, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
Well, after defying a subpoena and refusing to testify before the House Select Committee about that statement, Bannon was ordered yesterday to report to prison by July 1st to serve a 4-month sentence, just like former White House aide Peter Navarro. Those are just some of the long list of Trump attorneys, aides, and associates that are facing repercussions for their involvement with the big lie. Rudy Giuliani lost his law license, owes nearly $150 million for defaming Georgia poll workers, and just a few weeks ago was served an indictment in the Arizona election interference case at his 80th birthday party. Also facing charges in Arizona for allegedly conspiring to overturn the election is Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Today, he pleaded not guilty to those charges. On top of that, 2,000 Mules, the conspiracy-ridden movie about election fraud created by Dinesh D'Souza, has officially been pulled from all platforms. And, of course, there's Donald Trump himself, who last week was found guilty by a jury of his peers on 34 felony counts. And while some of these are state cases, some are federal. It's an important reminder that no matter how slow it may sometimes feel, the wheels of justice are, in fact, turning. And the Trump-to-prison pipeline is real. I'm joined now by David Jolly, former Republican congressman who is no longer affiliated with the Republican Party, who is also an MSNBC political analyst. So he is affiliated with us, which we're very grateful for. David, I wanted to do this today because I do think that on the Democratic side, there's a kind of despair that has set in, thinking Trump is sort of a Superman. But he's not. Sure. I mean, he's been involved in 4,000 lawsuits, something like that, in his lifetime. Every time he's gone to court in New York, he's lost, whether it's the case where he owes $500 million, whether it's the E. Jean Carroll rape adjudication, or whether it's the 34 felony counts. And look at all of the people he's left disbarred and jailed. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Joy, it's hard sometimes to recognize this, but you're exactly right. Given all of the challenges that Donald Trump and the people around him have thrown at our republic, at American democracy, one of the themes of his first term and thereafter is that the courts largely held, certainly imperfectly. I mean, there are lots of problems with delays in prosecutions, with certain decisions. We're watching them right now. But we can see evidence of accountability, however long it takes. And I appreciate that in your read-in, you point out the victims in each of these cases.
Yes.
Right? For Alex Jones, the victims were the families of Sandy Hook, 26 people who lost their lives, and the judgment was on their behalf. For Steve Bannon, the victim was the American people because he knew stuff about January 6th, refused to cooperate. Same with Mark Meadows, supporting a boss who was trying to steal the election. Rudy Giuliani, on down the line. These are people who engaged in crimes against somebody. And sure, some of the verdicts were civil because that's the best that justice could hold. But justice has delivered. And I don't think there's many tears for people tonight. However many Alex Jones has, nobody's wasting their tears on that guy.
But and you mentioned the tears, but I think that is part of the point. The level of self-victimhood on the right, the way that these privileged men, most of whom are wealthy, well-off, Steve Bannon, even though he dresses like a slob, he's actually very rich. He doesn't look like it, but he is. Yeah. These men have made millions. Alex Jones is making something like $5 million a month, torturing these families whose babies were killed, whose kindergartners were killed. He thought it was fun and it was lucrative to torture them. And now when he has to face the music, he's crying and expecting pity. Bannon is like, no one can hold me. Yeah, someone can hold you. The jail. You're going to be there right up until the election, buddy. You're barely going to be out in time to vote, even if you still have that right. But they feel so sorry for themselves. And I talk a little bit about that, because to me, that is what is filtered out to their base. They feel self-pity rather than pride in a country they supposedly love.
No, that's right. These are largely weak little people who exercise a cruel arrogance to make up for their own insecurities and vanities. And they found a perfect support network in Donald Trump as their leader, because that's exactly who he is as well, right? Always the victim, and nobody understands he was not privileged. He's the victim, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all, you know what, that you can't say on TV. And it makes these moments of accountability so rich, Joy, so rich. I mean, there are fewer despicable things that can be done than what Alex Jones did after the shooting in Sandy Hook. Fewer despicable things that can be done than what Steve Bannon did when the American people were begging for information about January 6th. And fewer despicable things that can be done than trying to steal people's vote and defraud them of their democracy, which is what Trump and Meadows and Giuliani and D'Souza and all these other people did. They deserve what's coming to them. But fundamentally, they are weak, little, fragile men who have rested on their own privilege, and now the ticket's up.